What's up, everybody? My name is Mike Versbro, and today I'm going to be talking about Beth Moon and National Geographic and this whole debacle that arose when National Geographic put out an article using her photos, and they were quickly put under a lot of scrutiny when people realized that the Milky Way and other images of the stars were cloned and poorly photoshopped behind these ancient trees. So before we proceed, I just want to put this out there. Please don't harass Beth Moon on her Facebook page. She's gotten a ton of scrutiny and harassment already, and National Geographic is finally looking into these images and actually took down the original article, which was titled "See the World's Oldest Trees by Starlight." So they are looking into this for the photo manipulation, and I definitely don't advocate, attacking somebody, even if there's clear evidence that they did something wrong or deceitful. We shouldn't harass this lady anymore, but we should definitely talk about the mistakes that she did and how we could avoid them, and as a community of photographers just improve to be more transparent and just be better photographers overall. So let me just jump into National Geographic's guidelines and some other articles they put out on how they spot altered photos, because one of my biggest gripes with this whole thing is, how did it even get this far? How did they allow this article to be released when the pictures were so blatantly, obviously photoshopped and composited, which we're going to go over in a minute. So the good thing is they took down the original page, as we see here, and they have a strong policy against photo manipulation, and they've initiated an investigation. Cool, great. But let's just check out some of the photography guidelines under Your Shot. Now, Your Shot is a photography community on National Geographic where anybody could post their photos to, and they definitely have some strict guidelines for those people that are posting. Now, one would hope and imagine that they hold freelance photographers and other photographers that they're promoting in an article up to those same standards and ethics. So let me just go over those photo guidelines really quick. So let's just scroll through some of the things that she definitely violated in her pictures. Obviously, there's an ethical violation because she manipulated the subject of the photo. Now, if we scroll down to caption, we insist on the truth in captioning and expect full disclosure in the story behind the photo. The description should be complete and accurate. Not only does this establish trust and lend greater credibility to your photo, but it also increases the engagement of the viewer. If we go to cloning, cloning is not allowed. Cloning is a process of adding or subtracting elements from a photograph. An example would be removing a pole from behind a person's head in a portrait, adding people to a crowd, or if you mirror repetitive objects in a photo. So she definitely violated that. Now, if we go to composite, composites are allowed in Your Shot, and to be eligible for publication in National Geographic magazine, the images must be combined parts made at the same time. Don't submit final images where the foreground was shot at noon and the sky was shot at sunset. We, the editors, do encourage creativity with your photography, as certain select assignments may allow images that are composites to be taken from different times. Please review what the editor of the assignment will allow or not allow to be submitted. So basically, they are not opposed to composites, but they do have a certain guideline to that. And she violates that if she takes a picture during the day and then composites the Milky Way or the stars at night. That's a violation of their composite rule. So let's go down even further. And that seems about it. They do have a thing here about raw files. To be eligible to print publication, photographers must have a raw file on hand to turn over to our editors. And I just want to jump over to one more article that they released about altered pictures and how they spot altered pictures. So a few of you might remember when National Geographic was under fire for altering a photo with the pyramids. They actually moved it over so it would fit on the front cover of their magazine. And I understand why they did that, for, just to make it more appealing for the front cover. But I don't think they were transparent about doing that alteration, which is what got a lot of people upset. And if we read through this article, Let's just skim down here. You can't always tell if a photo is fake, at least not without a lot of forensic digging. Even our experts can be fooled, as in a 2010 when we published what was later learned to be a doctored photo from the contributor on Your Shot. We work with the most admired photographers in the world, but just like we require our writers to provide their notes, we require photographers on assignment to submit raw files of their images, which contain pixel information straight from the digital camera sensor. We request the same from Your Shot photos sent in by members of the public or stock images we buy. If a raw file isn't available, we ask detailed questions about the photo, and yes, sometimes what we learn leads to us to reject it. Well, where was the detailed information about Beth Moon's photos? Because clearly on some of these photos, you're going to notice that something looks out of place or wrong, and anybody that's photographed the Milky Way should have been able to pick this out, especially at National Geographic when they're all supposed to be in the photography business and that industry. So you would imagine somebody will look at this and be like, that doesn't look right. So let me open up some of her pictures and you'll see what I'm talking about. Now, the picture that I think started it all with this article is this one right here. Now, just looking at it, you could see that this Milky Way panorama is all out of whack. It doesn't make sense. You have the core here, but then part of the core right here, and we know it doesn't actually look like that if you ever seen a Milky Way panorama before. And let's just click on the second picture. Here we can see everything that's been cloned and flipped and moved around. And there's probably more stuff in there that we can't even find. But clearly this is a composite shot. It looks like around the trees you could probably see a little bit of the blue from it was maybe a daytime picture, and she threw this starry background behind it. But yeah, this is just a really poorly done Photoshop job. Now, I'm not against compositing images. I do it all the time when I'm using a star tracker, and I'll take a picture of the foreground separately and I combine those two images together. And there are several ways to make this look natural. And one thing I try to do is be accurate to the location. So yeah, I might be compositing that shot because I'm trying to get the cleanest image possible, but I'm also making sure that my Milky Way is rising in a very similar, if not the exact spot that it would rise had I just taken a single photo from that location. So that's one thing that we should strive to do if we are creating composites. We should definitely try to make sure that they're accurate and represent that location properly, because you never know, one day National Geographic or some other major publication could reach out to use your photos. And you don't want to end up in this position where somebody sees it and calls it out as a fake. So that is what started this whole thing. And I find it really hard that National Geographic, the editors or publishers, or even other photographers that work there didn't see this first picture and just raise the question of, this doesn't look right. Something's going on here. She probably, photoshopped this, and should have stopped it right dead in the water right there. Now, if we jump to some of the other photos, people were also doing some investigating, and clearly the same night sky was used in this same set of images. And looking very closely, it's kind of hard because it is a little pixelated, but there's a lot of blue back here. Again, if you see blue in a tree line, it typically is showing that this was taken at a different time of the day. It wasn't taken at night. Either the moon was out, or either it could have been during blue hour, but it most likely wasn't taken under this night sky that she put in the background. So these also look like they were composite shots as well, and nobody caught it at Nat Geo. Another photo in question was this one. Now, if we look at this photo, there's a lot of cloning going on, which again violates National Geographic's policy, but I can't really tell on this one. It's very well blended if it's the original starry night sky background or if she composited that. But again, there's a ton of cloning going on. So let's close that one out. Here we have two sets of trees, and the same Milky Way photo was used for both of them. Definitely a composite on this one. You can see a hard line in the background here, and it doesn't fade to black. Typically, things should get darker as they get further away from the camera, and this does not. It is very bright all the way back to the horizon, so that's usually a clear indication this was taken during daytime, and then the night sky was added in later. And then she also used the same night sky for this photo, which it is blended better for this photo. But again, it is not the original shot. It's a composite, which she did not disclose to National Geographic. And lastly, we have this photo right here where Beth did some black and whites of these trees, and it looks like this is the colorized version of the same picture with less contrast. And the highlights are all pretty much the same. You can see the shadows here all line up. And then she added a Milky Way right here, which kind of just stops. So it doesn't really make sense that it just stops and the stars get lighter, that you can see a little bit of halo. Pretty good indication that this is a composite. Now this is going to be the last photo that I talk about of Beth Moon's, but you can see the Milky Way is in this top corner right here, and it's a very low angle. This is like an east-facing Milky Way, and it shouldn't be this high up on this angle. I'll show you what it really should look like on that angle, and that's what you see right here. This is the same exact location. The angle of the photo is a little different, but east-facing Milky Way is going to be a lot lower to the horizon on this angle, and hers is just too far up because you would see a lot more of the core if it continued, which doesn't happen in the northern hemisphere in America here. So as we can see from all these examples, National Geographic has dropped the ball in this. I'm glad they're trying to correct it now, but this is just a real slap in the face to night photographers out there. And I understand why so many Milky Way photographers are upset, because they're not getting featured on National Geographic, and they have some amazing pictures. And now you have somebody that comes along with poorly done composites, and they're basically getting free advertising for their photos. She sells her pictures for over $2,000, and they're really bad composite shots. Not all of them, but there's evidence that a lot of them are. So when this happens, it really makes National Geographic look bad. They're a household name, and it was a privilege if you were featured in National Geographic. And when this type of stuff happens, it just makes them look irresponsible and lose credibility. Alright, so I think the moral of the story is just be open and honest about your photography and your composite shots. There's nothing wrong with creating something that might be unnatural, but be transparent about it, just in case you are ever going to have that image, in the publication or in the magazine. You don't want this type of backlash to affect you and your photography in the future. Now, there will be people that are opposed to composite shots, and I totally get that, but this is an artistic freedom. If you want to mess around with your photography different than somebody else, me or anybody else shouldn't tell you what you can and can't do. Alright, so that about wraps it up. If you have anything to say, please leave in the comment section below. And I have no ill will towards Beth Moon or National Geographic. I think they just dropped the ball on this and need to tighten things up a little bit. It sounded like they had a process in place to check photos, but it also looks like they weren't following those processes because they clearly didn't get raw files. It's also pretty clear they didn't question her enough to find out about these particular photos and how they were created. So I think they learned a lesson here, and hopefully they tighten things up. All right, guys, take it easy. Bye.